Okay, so we left off in the last video with the age-old question, what size should I set my body copy continuous text at? And I'm going to show you $1,000,000 shortcut to get right there. But what you're looking for is an elegant size. You've been told your whole life probably to set your papers at Times New Roman at 12 points and to double space it. And that tends to look very large and clunky looking, more like a children's book than a sophisticated look that we're going for as graphic designers. So there's a shortcut, and I learned this from John Drew at Cal State Fullerton. He used to work for a publication, I believe is the story, and they figured out that a good starting point was to figure out what size a font that everybody has on their computer looked good at. And the conclusion was that Times New Roman set at 9 points looked good, with about 3 points of leading, which we'll talk more about in a bit. But it doesn't mean that you can set every typeface at 9 points and it'll look good, because what's really key is the X height of the font, meaning the space that a lowercase x occupies, and you'll see that in a bit here. So you don't want to use Times New Roman, especially all the time, because it's a default in a lot of programs. So this is not about choosing Times New Roman and setting it at 9. It's about using Times New Roman, setting it at 9 to figure out what size you should set the font that you want to use. Now, it's not a guarantee. Some fonts may look too big even at this size, although probably not likely. Some may actually get too small, and that would be fonts that have a very high contrast of thick to thin parts. Okay, and so here's just a reminder that you can have all these same fonts at 300 points, or whatever point size, but in this case happens to be 300, and some look bigger than others, and that is because of this space here, which is called the X height. And if you look at the lowercase x, you can see that when the X height is huge, it makes the font look huge, and the difference is made up in the ascenders, like you see on the D, and the descenders like you see in a P. Okay, so here is the story. Here's what you want to do. Pause and read this, and then in the next frame I'm going to show you what that would actually look like doing inside of Illustrator. So you type out the word text in Times New Roman at 9 points. Lock it, take the font that you want to use, put it over the top, and really, really zoom in. Then you're just going to adjust the size of your font to make it match the X height of Times New Roman at 9 points. So in red is Times New Roman at 9 points. Your font's on top. You're either going to have to make it bigger or smaller. Then you just simply look in Illustrator and see what time it is, or what size it is. I'm gonna pick a font in Illustrator right now for my menu. So I'm picking a font that I'm going to use for my descriptions, which is basically the body copy, the continuous reading, the stuff that doesn't have to be huge. And I'm going to use a font here called Dido. So that's what it looks like. Now, what size do I want to set it at so that it looks similar to Times New Roman set at 9? So I'm going to do that same exact thing that I just showed you, where I type out the word text with 3 X's just to make the X height obvious, and then I need to change that to Times New Roman. Just a regular version of Times New Roman, and at 9 point. It doesn't matter whether it's Times or Times New Roman, it works either way. And then I need to take the font that I will be using and put it over the top of that. And just to make my life easier, to see things clearer, first of all I'm going to zoom way in, but also I'm going to take the Times New Roman set at 9, I'm going to change its fill color to red, I'm going to do Command 2 to lock that selection. Actually, before I do that, let me just back that up one step, save myself having to type again. So I'll just click and drag with the Option key held down to make a copy. I'll change this one to the font that I want to use, which I said was Dado. Why am I picking Dado? Just because in the example I showed you already, I used Helvetica, and I gave you the spoiler alert that it came out to 7.7. So I want to choose a font that comes out probably a little bit different. Okay, so now I'm going to go to this one. I'm going to change the fill color to red, and then I'm going to go Command 2 to lock it in place, and then I'm going to set this on top and really get in there close, like really close. And I can see that I actually, unlike the last example where I had to make it smaller, and this one I have to make the font a little bit bigger. So very carefully holding the Shift key down and stretching out from a corner here, but I'm not actually stretching because I have the Shift key down. I release the mouse, then I release the Shift key, getting close on the top, so I'll go here, Shift key down, bring that down, Shift key up, getting very close. Oops, I'm so close, zoomed in, that the arrow keys are pretty much useless at my setting. Okay, that's pretty darn close right there. And then I may want to, and just as a reminder here, how do we check to see that we didn't accidentally stretch our font? We click on these three dots, we look here, and we're expecting to see 100 and 100%. If it's not, set them to 100, zoom back in, double check. Okay, so I can see that my font here with the Dado is 3, and I'm not going to go to a ridiculous amount of decimal points here. 1 decimal point is fine, so that would be 9.4. So I'll just punch that in at 9.4, and we will call it a day as far as knowing what size to set that particular font at. I'm going to zoom back out, go over to all of the areas in my menu that are going to be Dado, which are the descriptions, and I'm going to make those 9.4 in size. I'm not going to worry about the leading quite yet. I just want to go in and grab every single one of these and put the type size at 9.4 and the font at Dado. Now, if that starts to get tiresome, which it probably is by now, here's one little shortcut to get you on the way. You can just simply select the area that you're going to change, and then grab the eyedropper tool and click on an area that has already been changed. So that saves you 2 steps. Now, there are even more advanced ways of setting type, but they can be confusing when you first start. But I'll just tell you what they are, just in case you find yourself shortly at a job where you're doing a lot of this. They're called styles. So in this case, we would be using character styles, which is just basically a way of setting up the parameters for the font that you want to use. You just select it, you click on the style, and it automatically changes to the size. Not only that, but if you need to change something, you go into the style and you change it, and it changes everywhere. But like I said, it takes a while to explain that, and it's probably good to spend quite a few hours just doing stuff like this so you become really familiar with all the different ways of setting type and experience the labor of frustration. With that done, the one that we haven't addressed yet is our main categories. So in this case, appetizers. Now we don't want to bring in a third font. 2 fonts is almost always plenty. So I'll stick with Helvetica New, but I'll probably bump these up in size a little bit. Let's try that. 24. Notice I'm still not changing the leading yet. So yeah, I'm just going to go now and grab all of these. I'll use the same little trick with the eyedropper tool. And you can see some of it's looking good and some of it's looking awful. And mainly our issues right now are the spacing in between. Like look how, drinks is jammed way up against something that doesn't even belong to. And we'll adjust that soon enough. But one more thing that we should do is we want to get these prices probably in line. It usually makes sense on a menu to know where to go to look at the prices. Not every place does it. Obviously that'll be your choice. But two things. So one that I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of making those regular, I'm going to make them bold. And then the other thing that we have to be really careful about with numbers is the kerning. So I'm not going to do it here just for time constraints, but what you want to do is on every single number, you want to get in here and look at that horrible spacing in there and make sure that you have leading that is appropriate. So I have all my bolding done. And hopefully this goes without saying. I just have a very limited amount of items here just for demonstration purposes. So you should obviously have the appropriate amount of things here. Also, you can see my descriptions are very goofy. And we're not trying to make a comedic project out of this. I just, to keep my mind occupied, put whatever came first in my head when I was typing these out. Okay, so now our next step is going to actually be to make an alignment with these numbers. Now, unlike Word, you don't just have tabbing available to you up at the top always. What you have to do in this program is you have to select your type box that you're working in, your area text, and you go to Window, and then you go to Type, and then you go to Tabs, and the tabs come up. Now, for the most part, you're going to use this option here, and this happens a lot of times when you zoom in. The tab thing kind of falls apart, and what I think you just press there's a little like magnet in there that'll help you put it back into place. Worst case scenario, you just close it and bring it back. But if you can get at the little magnet, you definitely want it stuck in place. So you want this white area in here to match the white area that's inside of your text box. Okay, so most of the time you're going to use left justified tab, but you can experiment with these other things to see what they do and how they work. They're pretty straightforward. Let's say that we want our first menu item here. We make sure that we have the left justified tab clicked, and then we go to where we want the left justified tab to be, and we click right there. Then we just simply grab the text tool, put it in front of the item that we want to tab over, and then just hit the tab key. So we'll do that with all of our numbers, and I'll be back. If you have the tab set, it doesn't matter if this falls off the magnetic click. Okay, so now that we have all of those, let me zoom out, Command minus, and let's say, for example, that we wanted to move them further away or closer together. This is a very important step. You have to have all of the text selected, otherwise this doesn't work. So I put my cursor in here, I do a Command A, and I click on this little guy to get it where I want. But now I can grab this and I can move it, and those numbers move with it. So that's a nice little automated feature to save you some time. You can close this tab menu up at any time and bring it back out again if we need it. I'm going to click away to expose what's done here so far. So the big thing now that we have left to deal with is the leading, so that we get a nice, beautiful, consistent spacing among items. And I will save that for the next video.